Hi everyone, welcome to this session where I'm going to explain about ransomware attacks and the reflection on the dark web. That's me. I manage the global security research team at TrustWave. We're part of the SpiderLabs team at TrustWave, and I'm the VP of security research there. So here are the topics I'm going to cover today. First, I'm going to talk about the impacts, global impacts of ransomware attacks. Then discuss in detail the Kaseya BSA Reveal ransomware attacks that we experienced in July and some unique aspects about them. We will talk about ransomware as a service phenomenon, and then the interesting story of Reveal going down in July and then its return just recently. We will end up with some best practices to help you protect your organization. Ransomware attacks have become very prevalent. According to the FBI report from 2020, there were 25 reported ransomware attacks in 2020. We're talking about ransomware attacks against organizations, not against consumers or individuals. And we believe that the actual number is much higher. Not every corporation, not every organization necessarily reports the ransomware attack they experience for a variety of reasons. Just in 1 week, in September 2020, we saw 71 attacks launched by 8 different ransomware groups, and we collected that statistics with the help of 6Kill. The average ransom payment almost doubled in the first half of 2021 compared to 2020, and reached an amount of close to $600,000 US. Losses tripled in 2020 compared to 2019 and are 8-fold higher than what they were in 2018. Security Vendor Ventures projected that the direct and indirect damages from ransomware attacks are going to reach $20 billion in 2021, a huge amount. And the reason why it's so much higher than the other numbers is that it includes direct and indirect damages, such as the cost of recovering from the attack, the reputation damage, the cost of legal actions, etc., etc. So it's definitely ransomware attacks against organizations around the world is becoming a major problem, and it's increasing. In a ransomware attack, there are some typical tricks you will always see. Here you can see a screenshot from a ransomware that started sometimes in late June, early July, called Blackbite. And as you can see, its design is quite sleek. It has a logo, it has icons, and so on. But from technical perspective, there are a few things I'd like to highlight. First of all, unlike ransomware attacks against consumers, here they don't use one ransom amount for every victim, but the ransom payments will vary. There is a key that is specific to the victim, and it is shown in that ransom message. Here we blurred it, it's on the right in the red circled box. I will explain soon how the victim is expected to use it. There will always be some time pressure on the victim. They are given 1 day or a few days to pay the ransom. And they do that, or ransomware gangs, to make it a lot harder for the victim to try to recover their files in some other way. They will always provide some free sample decryption. You can submit 1 or 2 files, encrypted files that were encrypted by the ransomware, and they will decrypt them for you. And the reason why they do it is because they want to show you that, or show the victims that they can decrypt the files, and then the victims will be more willing to pay, right? They're building their confidence here. Quite often, they will include a warning to not contact legal enforcement and not to try to decrypt the files. And sometimes they are correct. If you try to decrypt the files, it can corrupt them to the point where the decryptor from the ransomware group will not work. Ironically, the reputation there, I mean, those cyber actors or threat actors that distribute ransomware, the reputation is important for them. Why is it important for them? Because they know that if, for example, they will not be able to decrypt your files, or they will not do it for whatever reason. Rumors will spread on the internet that actually people pay the ransom and never get their files back, and then victims will less likely pay in the future. So indeed, in most cases, when victims pay, they get their files recovered and are not exfiltrated on the dark web. Revil is one of the most active ransomware groups in the last 2-3 years. It's a combination of two words, ransom and evil. The malware itself, also known by the name Sodinokibi, and it's active since early 2019. It's inherited its code from another group, ransomware group called GovWare, and it's a typical example of ransomware as a service. A little over a year ago, one of their main actors gave an interview on the dark web where he talked about how they drive their operations and revealed many aspects about this group. So here are a few things we can learn from that interview. First of all, in each of the years, 2018 and 2019, Revil made more than $100 million each year, and we believe that the revenues increased significantly in 2020 and in 2021. They are using a revenue sharing model with their affiliates. So the way it works is that their affiliates, or sometimes they're called distributors, get 70–80% of the revenues, which are basically the ransom payments, and they're responsible for infecting computers and networks and for killing backups. Now remember, we're talking about organizations, about companies that protect their networks in general. So penetrating into an organization, infecting them, and getting into the sensitive data there is not easy. That's probably why their affiliates get the lion's share of the revenues. And then the gang itself, or the developers, get the rest, 20–30% of the revenues. They're responsible for developing the malware, refreshing it occasionally, and for the negotiation pressure services. I'll talk more about it soon. They own the wallets, so the payments go first to the main gang, and then they pay to their affiliates. Again, ironically, they use internal pen testing services. They know that law enforcement and other players, for example, their competitors, might try to take down their servers or run some DDoS attacks against them. So they actually pen test their servers to make sure they are as robust as possible. They claim in that interview that they detected some attempts of law enforcement to join as affiliates, and detected and blocked them or denied their requests. Of course, perhaps there were some other attempts of law enforcement to join, which they did not attack. And as we see quite often with malware that originate from Russia or ex-USSR geographies, Revil as well is programmed to skip computers that use ex-USSR languages, and sometimes some additional languages such as specific Arabic versions. The reason why they do it is because in those countries, if they don't attack local targets, local companies and organizations, they usually can keep running their business for a longer period of time. There are plenty of opportunities for Revil to really infect, or their affiliates to infect different organizations. First of all, they exploit a variety of known CVEs. Unfortunately, many servers out there are not fully patched or hardly patched, so they can exploit them. But occasionally, they will also use 0 days, as happened in the Kaseya attacks. They might use also brute force attacks to guess passwords, and that way manage to log in, or abuse RDP access that is too open. You might be aware that RDP access to many networks out there are being sold on the dark web. In that interview, they claimed that they were developing a mix of file encryption with DDoS attacks, so for increased pressure. The idea here is that once they attack some organization, not only they will encrypt their files and exfiltrate them and show that they're going to publish them on the dark web, at the same time, they will also DDoS their networks, make it almost impossible for that corporation to keep running their business, and then, of course, they will be more willing to pay the ransom. But, and again, ironically, there's always some irony when we talk about those groups. they are careful to not drag the business to bankruptcy. And it did happen once already. Travelex, a financial company from the UK, went bankrupt after they were attacked by Revil a couple of months ago in early 2020. So what happened when they attacked a set organization in the, oh, excuse me, I skipped a slide, here we go. So the Kaseya attacks took place in early July. They really started on Friday at 2 p.m., just before the long US Independence Day weekend. And of course, the timing is not coincidence. That's when many people left their workplaces, they traveled, they had plans for that long weekend. So they knew that once the attack is going to gain momentum, it will take a lot longer for the corporations to mobilize their security teams back, and they will just be able to run their attacks for a longer period of time. In that case, they did leverage a zero-day Kaseya VSA server. It was a vulnerability that was known to the vendor, but they didn't release the patch yet. The VSA servers are basically what we call the remote monitoring and management, RMM servers, and they were used by many MSPs, managed service providers, to perform IT management for their clients. Hence, it made them a perfect target for this attack. Why? Because it's a model where an MSP has access to the networks of their clients, and once you can compromise the MSP, you may also get access to the networks, many other networks, and that's exactly what happened here. According to Kaseya, within a few days, about 50 MSPs were successfully targeted, and then 1,500 downstream businesses have been affected. So as you can see, on average, 30 businesses for every MSP that was successfully targeted. In this case, it was that zero-day was an authentication bypass vulnerability, which allowed them to log into those VSA server, have admin access. And what they did then is to deploy a malicious update, which really included the Revil ransomware. Okay, it is not a supply chain attack in the sense that they didn't really penetrate into the Kaseya infrastructure, as we saw back in December in the SolarWinds case, but they did manage to compromise the VSA server that are running in the MSPs and push that malicious update. Just a few days after the attack started, we released this blog on our SpiderLabs blog, which includes many technical details about that attack. And some of those details are included in this talk. This blog, by the way, was quoted by over 170 websites worldwide. So what was the execution flow? As I said, it started by exploiting the Kaseya zero-day. Then they pushed a malicious update down to the downstream servers. They decoded it using a PowerShell script. And then they used a legit Microsoft file called msmpeng.exe, which is basically an anti-defender antivirus file, to sideload the Revil loader. And from there, they loaded the actual malware, and it started encrypting the disk. That's the moment where the malware encrypts files. And then once they are done encrypting the files, and in many cases also exfiltrating them if they can, the victim was shown this message. That's the initial message that is shown. As I mentioned earlier, they use a key specific to each victim. So it's different from victim to victim. We blurred it out here. And they're expected to submit it either on some onion domain on the dark web, that's option number 1, or on a website called http://decoder.re. RE stands for probably for Revil, in option number 2. So the victim is expected to copy the key here and paste it in this website, as you can see here from this screenshot. And again, ironically, they use CAPTCHAs there on that website. And the reason why they use CAPTCHA is to block bots, like many other legit websites. Once that key is submitted, then the ransom message will show, the ransom demand message will show. In this case, we see that they are asking for 200,000 American dollars, and the victim is provided 7 days to pay, and if not paid within that time, the ransom is going to double. And now starts the even more pressuring of the victims. And one of the ways they do that is by maintaining a website on the dark web, which is called, they call Happy Blog. But believe me, there's really nothing happy about that blog. The messages you see there are the names of the companies they managed to compromise, the amount of data they managed to steal, and many screenshots that show that. So that's why, since it's an open page on the dark web, I didn't really blur any of those messages. But as you can see, they provide the name of their victims, the amount of data they stole. For example, in the lower part, in the lower example, you see an astounding amount of data, 4 terabytes, if you believe them, which include diagrams and files and personal information and so on. They will always try to show and demonstrate that they managed to steal data. So the company, for example, cannot deny it. Here is another example from a German victim they had. And diagrams, etc., screenshots from their servers, etc. At that point, the victim cannot deny that they were to the out there that they were not compromised, and they will consider more seriously to pay the ransom. In the Kaseya attack, we saw something interesting. That gang, Revil, offered a universal decryptor for $70 million. The dollars here are US dollars. And a few days later, they reduced the price to 50 million. If you sum up the ransom amounts that all their victims had to collectively pay, 70 million, certainly 50 million is a lot less. So in a way, what they say here is that if you come together and pay together, then you can actually save money. It's kind of a volume discount. As far as we know, no one paid that for that universal decryptor. The Kaseya attack, a ransomware attack, was one in a series of major ransomware attacks against American targets in 2021. Earlier, we had the attack against the Colonial Pipeline by some other ransomware group. And then the Washington, D.C. police was attacked by ransomware malware. JBS, which is a big meat product manufacturer in the US, was attacked by Revil. It came to the point where there was increasing pressure on the US administration to take an action. And indeed, a week after the Kaseya attack, the president of the United States tweeted that he had a conversation, he had a phone call with Putin, the Russian president, and explained that if ransomware attacks coming from his soil, they expect the Russian government to act. And they're not claiming that those attacks are sponsored or backed up by the government by any way, but still, US expect that if they provide evidences, then the Russian government will take an action. And there was a question there to the president, do you think there are going to be consequences to your call? Which he said by one word, yes. Of course, those tweets didn't go unnoticed by the dark web actors. Here you can see a few posts that we collected. The Russian text is a screenshot from their forums. The green text is our translation. We try to keep their slang and style. And what you see here basically is they say, just to make sure that not to attack Russian targets, because then you will be punished. And as long as you stay in Russia, don't be scared. Interestingly, 4 days later, the Revil sites went down. And their Happy Blog was not available anymore. Their unofficial spokesperson, which uses a profile unknown, the profile unknown, disappeared, and he was immediately banned on those forums. They claimed that they were trying to get hold of him and they couldn't reach him. There were rumors on the dark web that there is servers there. I mean, Revil servers got compromised. Actually, it was bad news for some of the victims because they were left without any ability to recover their files. because it was not possible to make ransom payments. And their affiliates, some of them became angry that they cannot, do not get the ransoms. Revil claimed in a later post they did is that one of the employee made a mistake, and when he was supposed to create a decryptor for one of their victims, he did it by mistake with the universal key, which meant that that decryptor that was specific for a victim was one could use it to decrypt files from any victim of the Kaseya attack. Okay, and indeed, just a few days later, Kaseya received the universal decryption tool. We don't know exactly how it got to their hands. We know they got it from one of their partners, but indeed, their victims then were able to use it to decrypt their files. One of the actors on the dark web posted that meme, since Revil went down and they had technical difficulties. Shortly after, in July, another ransomware group started called Black Matter, and this meme demonstrates how the Revil girlfriend is unhappy because her boyfriend now looks at other options. But Revil is back. Revil is back in early September, just about a month ago. They claimed that they managed to restore everything from their backup. Again, you can say there is some irony here. We detected a new Revil sample and it's available on VARS.us since September 4th. And Happy Blog resumed 3 days later with information about all the new victims. The screenshots we took here are from September. And as you can see here, again, they include financial data, diagrams, etc., policy documents, anything they can use to pressure their victims to pay. So with that, I'd like now to share some guidance to help you minimize the risk that your organization is going to be the next victim. First of all, always run supported versions of software. We still see many servers that run end-of-life, unsupported versions out there. Those servers do not get updates, and so they may be left vulnerable. And for the supported versions you run, patch them and do that quickly. If it takes you, for example, a month to deploy a patch, it gives the actors a month to attack your infrastructure. Always maintain regular air-gapped backups. Make them separate from your network. Disconnect them from your network once you don't run the actual backup. And also practice restore. Make sure that restore works and it covers all your sensitive files. Remember, if it's not complete, if it's partial, you might find when you actually try to use it in some doomsday that it's incomplete, but it's going to be too late. Use effective security email gateways, because sometimes how they might try to see the malware in your network through some email-borne attack, and use reputable endpoint protection, because it might be able to block the malware. Enforce strong passwords policy. As I mentioned earlier, they try to use brute force to guess passwords. If the passwords are strong, it will make it a lot harder. But even better, use MFA, use multi-factor authentication, because that would make logging to your networks very hard for that actors. Deploy network and data segmentation. Protect your critical data and locate it in a network that is well segmented. So moving from your more open networks to that network is as hard as possible and limited. Pen test your environment. Make sure it's as robust as possible and minimize access rights like RDP. Employees who are leaving, make sure that you remove their access. And as I said, try to minimize that access. Use dark web monitoring of your assets, such as your domains, your executive names. And why? Because sometimes there are groups on the dark web that steal that information, collect it, and sell it to other groups that will try to use it. If you manage to detect that communication on the dark web, you might get a early notification for the attacks against your organization. And have a plan for a ransomware attack. When it happens, it's going to be messy. Your customer support calls will be bombarded with calls of angry clients. The media might reach out to you. Your executives will be unhappy. You'd better have a plan what to do exactly if that happens. And in particular, make a decision on whether you're going to pay the ransom. Some organizations decide not to pay the ransom. And there's one benefit in doing that beyond the financial saving, which is the gangs out there learn that they are unwilling to pay. So they're less likely to attack them again, versus organizations that do pay and might be marked as better targets also for the future. So with that, we're open to some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mador. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take questions from the floor. Over to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say, Ziv, thank you for actually joining us. But that's for this live Q&A. Earlier, we were while we were waiting, to go on, to go live, we were briefly talking about the Kaseya and the SolarWinds attacks, right? And some of the confusion or the market has in terms of say it being a supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you like to share a bit more information on that?
Sure, Clayton. So yes, there is some difference between the two cases, SolarWinds and Kaseya, but there are also some similarities. The main difference is that in the case of SolarWinds, the threat actors managed to compromise the vendor's network. And they actually created a malicious update on their servers. It was pushed from SolarWinds into their customers' products, or customers' deployments. So it's really what we call a supply chain attack, right? The vendor was compromised. In the case of Kaseya, it's slightly different. We are not aware of any compromise that Kaseya had directly. But what the threat actors did is to compromise the servers. And from there, the servers that were installed in about 50 MSPs, managed service providers. And from there, they got access to many other downstream businesses. So it's not really a supply chain attack, but you see there's something similar, because in both cases, they, by compromising, by the initial compromise, they were able to distribute a malicious update.
Right. So, the other thing we all know, we say, okay, make sure you do your backups, and now so that you can restore your system in the event of like a ransomware attack. How do you go about making sure that that your backups, that like the integrity of the backups?
Absolutely. It's a really important question because many organizations have backups, some backups, and they have that sense of security that are protected. But when time comes and they try to use the backup, they may find out either it was compromised as well, or restore doesn't work for whatever reason, or the backup is partial and doesn't cover all their critical content. Certain file extensions, certain file drives, certain servers were not included in the backup. It's those things that people might find out when they try to use to restore from backup. But at that point, it's too late. It's really important, as I mentioned in the best practices, to make sure that the backups is complete, covers all your important content, all your servers, the servers that are important for you, etc. All the file extensions, that it's updated regularly, and to try to restore it to make sure it works. Secondly, as again mentioned in the best practices, keep it air-gapped, keep it separate, disconnected as much as you can, because one of the things that the ransomware does when it starts infecting your files is to infect also backups or to just trash them. If the backup is separate, it's protected well enough for access controls, the ransomware wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay. So this in your presentation, you you talked about Blackbyte. Is there anything else that you would like to share? I mean, given that it is relatively new.
Sure. So the Revit case is very interesting, and one of the interesting things about it, back in July, that it went dark for almost 2 months, following what seems to be that political pressure by the Russian authorities. And then other players, other ransomware players, became more active to gain the opportunity that opened up for them. One of them is Blackbyte, which I mentioned as the example in one of the very first slides. Blackbyte is also a pretty sophisticated piece of ransomware, and we analyzed it thoroughly, and we're about to release 2 detailed blogs about it. We might even release a decryptor tool for those for that ransomware. So just stay tuned. Probably in a week or 2, we will release those blogs.
Right. So during our conversation, while we were waiting to go live, we were talking about technology and also the influence. I mean, you had pictures of presidents, where it reaches, that level, and then you see certain solutions quickly come in. I mean, how do you see this change?
That's a great question, Clayton, because we know that technology can help us on only that much. When we deploy security solutions, they can help us, they can protect us from many attacks, and they can block and detect many attacks, but they're not gonna stop the cyber actors. And since this is a very profitable activity for many of them, very profitable, they will continue doing that, and we actually see that it's increasing. More gangs and cyber groups, cyber criminals get into that business. So something else has to happen, and that's a political pressure on the governments of countries where they operate. Many of them in East Europe, but also other areas, and pressure them to take an action, make it a priority to arrest those cybercriminals or take other actions to stop their activity.
Right. Thanks, Ziv. I mean, I just saw like it come up on the chat box, that we need to end. I'd like to thank you, for taking the time like to speak to everyone. Like, is there anything else you'd like to share before we say bye?
No, it was a great opportunity to talk to you, and as I said, stay tuned for more